Okay, so I am still trying to find a workaround for selling on Shopify and selling outside of the UK. I've been down several rabbit holes with this. So I've gone back to the basics and I've started to look at whether or not it's actually worth the effort. I've looked at my figures and I've worked out all my numbers for this tax year, which ends shortly. 44% of my sales are from within the UK, 18% from the EU, and 38% account for the rest of the world, and that's predominantly the USA. So it's worth me trying to find a workaround to ship internationally. I've looked at several things. So within Shopify, they do have a system for potentially collecting taxes for, say, the USA. But if you are on Shopify Basic, which is the cheapest of the paid subscriptions, you can't use it. You have to be on one of the more expensive packages, which for me at the moment is impossible. The package I'm on at the moment is still costing me £25 a month, and I think it would be nice to have an integration for that. The other problem, aside from the US, is just getting into Europe. So you need an IOSS number. When you sell on Etsy, as I also do at the moment, they do everything. Because Etsy is an e-commerce site, they are already registered with their own IOSS number. And as someone selling on the Etsy platform, you use that number. They also collect all the taxes and all the VAT for worldwide sales. So there is no problem there. We don't have the same setup for Shopify. It is not an e-commerce site. It is a platform for people to set up their own shops. So it's not geared up for collecting taxes or having an IOSS number. Now, I did find that there are several companies out there that can set you up with an IOSS number, but it's going to cost you money, and we're talking hundreds. I think the cheapest one I found was something like £149. And for the number of sales I'm going to get, it's not really worth it, because the IOSS is for shipping to mainland Europe, to countries that are in the EU, or outside the UK basically. That doesn't apply for the US. So to pay out that kind of money just to potentially get about 18% of sales isn't worth the effort. So I've had another look at integrations, because there are go-betweens that are starting to appear now, even though we are now 2 years into when this became law. 2021 this became a law, and nobody still seems to be able to work out how small businesses, sole traders like me, can operate outside of the UK without going through an e-commerce platform. It's just the most ridiculous thing that I've ever heard. So I looked at the one that's on Royal Mail, because they recommended one called, I think it was called Taxamo, which is their third-party integration. So if you do your shipping through the click and drop system on Royal Mail Online, there's a third-party app that will act as your IOSS and deal with all of that for you. However, it is not set up to integrate with Shopify, so that's no good. Again, they've had 2 years to sort this out and nothing has changed. I have recently found another company called EAS, which seems to be more competent. Now, the good thing about these go-betweens for people like me who don't sell a lot outside of the UK, so there's no point in me having a big expensive system or buying my own IOSS when I might only make 20 sales a year outside the UK. What this does is it acts as your IOSS. It will collect your any taxes, VAT to those companies. It'll do it all for you. It's basically behaving like Etsy. And that takes all the hassle out of it. Now, in order for them to make their money, it charges per sale, and it's £2 per sale. So every time I sell something to either the EU or wherever, it will charge me £2 to process that sale, be my AOSS, and collect whatever taxes, VAT, registration, the whole lot. Which for me is perfect, because for the EU at 18% of sales, for me in the last tax year, that is 6 sales. I don't mind paying that £2 because I can pass that on to my customer. It's not a big deal. I don't yet know how to deal with the rest of the world yet. I haven't found an integration which will deal with worldwide taxes. So where you have state taxes to the US, and every state has its own tax rates. I've been reading on YouTube some people saying, well, you don't pay tax on products or sales under £250. That is not true. I still sell on Etsy and I do get US sales, and I am charged tax on every single sale. It doesn't matter how much it is. I think the cheapest thing I've sold to the US was about £20, and I paid £1 something in taxes, which then Etsy then remits back to the state where the customer is. So don't believe that. The only workaround that people seem to be finding for shipping to the US on Shopify, where they don't have the right setups or can't get the right setups, is simply to notify the customer at point of sale that they need to pay taxes on receipt of the goods. Now, as an online seller, as a small seller, most of you who are doing this will probably know that most customers do not read the small print. And there is a big risk that you will send your goods out to the country, it will arrive on their doorstep, and they will be asked to pay for the taxes that are missing. And if they refuse to pay it because they didn't realise, they didn't read the documentation, they've decided they don't want it anymore, they will just send the product back to you, and it'll take forever to get back to you, and then you're going to have to refund them, and you're going to lose money as well as sales on that. I think that's too risky. And considering, let's say 38% of my overseas sales are the US and rest of the world, by that I mean, for me it's mostly Canada, and I've had one sale to Australia. Do I want to take that risk? And I don't. So for now I'm going to try and get myself set up with this intermediate company that will be my IOSS. I'm going to get that up and running, and then I'm going to keep on investigating and trying to find how to deal with the US sales, because there's no point me being on Shopify and trying to replace Etsy with a Shopify or a similar system if I can't remit the taxes and the VATs that I have to by law. These aren't just because they tell you to. This is a legal requirement. If you don't do it, they are going to come down on you like a ton of bricks, and it's not worth the risk. It's also not worth the risk sending something and hoping that your buyer at the other end is going to pay their taxes, because they might not. And that will largely be because they may not have noticed that at checkout it says you're going to have to pay XYZ when you receive this. Now, it makes no difference, because whether you're charging them at point of sale or whether they're paying it at the other end, the customer is still paying for it. But it just bothers me that it's a risky system when you're sending your precious goods off to potential new homes and then somebody decides they don't want to pay for it. So that is where I am at the moment. I'm going to keep working on this, because as I look at my Etsy figures, I can see just how much traffic and sales are dropping, and I'll show you some of those. And I'm looking at my figures right from when I started to actively use Etsy, which was in 2018. And you can see where the peaks are, and you can see the continual fall from 2020, when I did quite well because I was selling crafting materials, and you can see the continued decline, certainly up until the end of 2022, because we're still quite early in 2023, and something has to change. It really, really does. I don't know how much actual physical money I am making out of my international sales, because although the numbers are up and the numbers are higher than my UK sales, I am paying a lot out because those are profit figures where I'm selling to those countries. So I have to take out the postage, which is pretty big. And Etsy now has such a long list of taxes and VAT and fees just per sale. I made a sale the other week which came to £74, which was for some fabric which I have sold to Italy. Now it's being managed by Etsy, so I don't have to worry about my IOSS and all the other bits and pieces. That's all been dealt with for me. But that £74, most of it, i.e. £41 of it, is the postage alone. And after Etsy has taken out all its taxes, its fees and its VAT, I have paid nearly £23 in fees. So look at that £74, take off the £41 for postage, which I will obviously have to pay to ship it, now take out the £22. Is it even worth it? I'm not entirely sure. I think I would rather have the US sales than the EU, the European sales. The postage is cheaper. It's cheaper to send something to the US than it is to try and get it over into Europe. And people in the US seem to be shopping more over here, and I don't know if that's because the pound is quite low against the dollar at the moment. I certainly noticed some changes in that, so it might be that they think they're getting more for their money. They also buy a bigger range of things from me. They're more likely to buy the things that I've made, like the coasters do well in the US. I sell some dresses, garments to the US. So I think that's a market that I would really want to keep. And at the moment, that's the one I can't get. That's the annoying thing. I have an EORI number, which enables me to ship overseas, not including the EU. That's no problem. My problem is just remitting the taxes. There is no point in me collecting the taxes my end myself and then having to remit them back to the states in the US that want them. It's just a ridiculous amount of admin for such a tiny company as myself. I am not VAT registered because I don't earn enough. And it just seems that it's an awful lot of admin for what is a relatively small amount of money. Now, my long-term aim is to reshore the company. I want to be able to make more, if not all, of my money from just selling to the UK. But as a transitional period between being on Etsy and being on Shopify, I need those backup of extra sales. And for now, certainly, I am going to keep using Etsy as well, because I think it's going to take a while to get any traction on my Shopify store. I know that some sellers who do very well on Shopify had to wait 4, 5, 6 months to get their first sale. It takes time to build up a reputation, especially when you're selling somewhere new, which is why I'm doing things like YouTube and promoting the shop here, there and everywhere. But it takes time, and we are in hard times. So that's the challenge at the moment. I don't feel like I've resolved any of it yet, but I feel like I might be close to resolving the EU issue. It's difficult when you see traffic coming into your Shopify store and you're looking at the locations and everybody who wants to browse is outside your country, and you know that they're looking and realising they can't buy anything from you because you're not set up for overseas. It's really frustrating. And I really hope that I can resolve this reasonably soon. Getting the documentation together for the IOSS is a bit tricky. I need to go away and find my SA250, which was my welcome letter from HMRC when I first registered as a new sole trader with HMRC. I've got my UTR, which is my unique tax reference, but apparently I need to have this letter to prove whatever I am. It never ends. It's just ridiculous. But I'm hoping that this new company, EAS, which acts as this IOSS go-between, is going to solve at least a part of the problem and will allow me to be seen outside of the UK. But I will keep at it, and hopefully I will have some good news to come. And hopefully this will be helpful for other small sellers who are struggling to deal with the fact that no one seems to care that sole traders can no longer seem to trade overseas. The lack of competency with companies that knew back in 2020 this was going to happen, and when the deadline came around in 2021 still weren't set up to enable companies to sell abroad. HMRC was apparently looking at setting up its own IOSS go-between for sole traders, and guess what? It's still not been done. What a surprise. Nothing seems to work in this country anymore, and it's ridiculously frustrating, particularly when you know there are companies out there that are able to deal with this problem. Why can't HMRC do this? You know, we managed to get EORI numbers at the drop of a hat. That was the easiest thing in the world to get. But you can't sell abroad because you can't organise the taxes and the VAT to the relevant countries. It's just absolutely unbelievable, and I'm surprised any sole trader in the UK is able to sell anywhere apart from on e-commerce platforms, which the main ones at the moment are Etsy, Amazon and eBay, and they're all rubbish companies. The problem is that with all of them you are at their mercy, which is why I'm trying to distance myself from Etsy, because if something happens to Etsy and it goes down overnight, everything's gone. You don't have any control over anything, and Amazon is the same and eBay is the same. Whereas with Shopify it's just a hosting platform, basically, is what it is. And that's why you need to get off them. But getting off them is difficult because they seem to be the only companies competent enough to be able to deal with selling anything anyway. And when you consider that everyone's buying worldwide now, everyone's shipping everything everywhere, no one is reshored entirely, and yet huge infrastructures that should have managed this 2 years ago are still not doing it. And it's incredibly annoying. Incredibly annoying. Anyway, I'm going to stop ranting because it's Sunday afternoon, the sun's out, and I'm fed up with trying to research things, going down rabbit holes, and then coming up against brick walls because I don't have hundreds and hundreds of pounds for private companies to set me up on things. It's just hilarious. Anyway, that's it. I'm done. That's all I'm doing today. I'm going to go and take a break because it's just ridiculous. Bye for now.